Talks from Beyond. Impossible conversations brought to live. Welcome to Talks from Beyond, a space where we travel to the past to converse with the brightest minds in history. Today we have the honor of hosting a unique encounter, bringing together two giants of psychology, Dr. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, and Dr. Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology. Let's begin. The first topic we want to address is the concept of the unconscious. For Freud, the unconscious is dominated by sexual and repressed impulses, while Jung proposes a collective unconscious filled with universal archetypes and symbols. Dr. Freud, could you explain your view of the unconscious?
Certainly. The unconscious is the core of my psychoanalytic theory. It is a repository of repressed desires, impulses, and memories, many of which have a sexual origin. From childhood, our sexual instincts, or what I call the libido, shape our psyche. These impulses, though repressed, influence our behavior, dreams, and neurotic symptoms. Psychoanalytic therapy seeks to make the unconscious conscious, freeing the individual from their internal conflicts. As I once said, the unconscious is the true psychic reality, whose knowledge we can only attain through its manifestations.
Thank you, Dr. Freud. Dr. Jung, you have a different view of the unconscious. Could you explain it?
Yes, and with pleasure. While I deeply respect Freud's contribution, my view of the unconscious goes beyond the sexual. I propose that there is a collective unconscious, shared by all humanity, which contains universal archetypes. These archetypes are patterns of behavior and symbols that appear in myths, religions, and dreams. I do not deny the importance of the sexual, but I believe reducing the unconscious to that limits the richness of the human psyche. As I have said before, the unconscious is not a demonic monster, but a natural force that, in itself, is neither good nor evil.
But dear Jung, don't you think your approach is too mystical? Science must be based on concrete observations, not speculations about universal symbols.
It's not mysticism, Freud. It's a deep exploration of the psyche. Archetypes are not inventions. They are psychological realities that influence our daily lives. For example, the shadow archetype represents the dark aspects of our personality that we repress. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear.
But isn't repression a necessary mechanism for civilization? Without it, we would be dominated by our most primitive instincts.
Repression may be necessary, but it is also dangerous. If we do not integrate these repressed aspects, they end up manifesting in destructive ways. Therapy should help people reconcile with their shadow, not repress it further.
This is a fascinating point. It seems that both agree on the importance of the unconscious, but differ in its nature and how to approach it. Dr. Freud, could you elaborate on how sexuality influences the unconscious?
Of course. Sexuality is not just a biological impulse. It is a force that structures our psyche from childhood. Unresolved sexual conflicts, especially in early stages like the Oedipus complex, can generate neuroses in adulthood. That's why psychoanalytic therapy seeks to make these conflicts conscious to free the patient from their symptoms. As I have said, sexuality is the core of psychic life.
But Freud, don't you think that by focusing so much on sexuality, you are ignoring other equally important forces, such as creativity or spirituality?
I do not ignore them, but I believe sexuality is the most powerful force. It is the engine behind much of our behavior, even in ways we do not recognize.
I do not see it that way. Sexuality is an expression of vital energy, but not the only one. Creativity, art, religion, all these are manifestations of the same energy you call libido, but which I prefer to see in a broader context.
But isn't it dangerous to dilute the concept of libido? We could lose sight of its transformative power.
On the contrary, expanding the concept of libido allows us to better understand the complexity of the human psyche. It's not about denying sexuality, but integrating it into a broader framework.
This is a passionate debate. Both agree on the importance of the unconscious, but differ in how to define and approach it. Dr. Jung, could you explain more about the collective unconscious and how it manifests?
Certainly. The collective unconscious is like a repository of experiences shared by all humanity. It contains archetypes, which are universal patterns of behavior and symbols. For example, the hero archetype appears in myths from all cultures, from Hercules in Greek mythology to modern heroes in cinema. These archetypes influence how we think, feel, and act. As I have said, the collective unconscious is the repository of all human experience since the dawn of time.
But isn't that speculation? How can we prove that these archetypes exist?
It's not speculation, Freud. Archetypes manifest in dreams, art, religions. They are patterns that repeat across all cultures. We cannot see them directly, but we can see their effects.
But science must be based on concrete observations, not subjective interpretations.
Science is not limited to the observable, Freud. It must also explore the intangible, the symbolic. Otherwise, we risk ignoring an essential part of human experience.
The second topic is about the therapeutic method. Freud, you emphasize rational analysis and dream interpretation as a way to access the unconscious. Jung, on the other hand, proposes a symbolic and spiritual exploration. Dr. Freud, could you elaborate on your approach?
Certainly. The human mind is not a mystery of divine symbols. It is a system driven by repressed desires, conflicts, and childhood experiences. My method, psychoanalysis, is based on rational analysis. By examining dreams and free associations, we uncover hidden traumas and repressed emotions. Only through this structured analysis can a patient truly understand and resolve their inner conflicts.
Dr. Freud, I respect your work, but the unconscious is far more than just a storage place for repressed desires. It is a vast, collective space filled with archetypes, myths, and deep symbolic meanings. Limiting therapy to rational analysis ignores the spiritual and symbolic dimensions of human experience. Patients need more than just to analyze their past. They need to explore their inner world, reconnect with universal symbols, and find meaning.
But Jung, meaning alone does not cure neurosis. A patient may find comfort in myths and symbols, but if the underlying psychological conflict remains unresolved, the symptoms will persist. Therapy should not be about poetic exploration, but about facing the painful truths that the mind tries to suppress.
But Freud, not all suffering comes from repression. Many of our struggles arise from a lack of meaning, a disconnection from the deeper layers of the psyche. You see neurosis as a disease to be treated, but I see it as a signal, a call for transformation. Sometimes, healing is not just about uncovering trauma, but about helping the individual integrate their unconscious into a greater sense of self.
And yet, without a methodical approach, therapy risks becoming vague and unscientific. How do you measure integration? How do you prove that symbols heal? My approach provides concrete results. Patients confront their past, resolve their conflicts, and experience measurable improvements.
Science is important, but so is the human soul. Not everything can be measured in strict analytical terms. My patients don't just want to be free from symptoms. They want to understand themselves deeply, to feel whole. Sometimes true healing requires a journey beyond rationality.
And sometimes that journey is just an escape from reality.
Or perhaps it is the path to a greater one.
Fascinating perspectives from both of you. It is clear that your approaches to therapy reflect deeper differences in how you view the human mind. This brings us to our next topic, religion and spirituality in psychology. Dr. Jung, you argue that spirituality plays a crucial role in psychological well-being. Dr. Freud, you, on the other hand, have been a strong critic of religion, seeing it as an illusion. Let's explore this divide. Dr. Jung, would you like to begin?
With pleasure. Human beings have an innate need for meaning, and throughout history, religion has provided a framework for that. The symbols, myths, and rituals of different cultures are not just stories. They reflect deep psychological truths. When we ignore this spiritual dimension, we risk leaving people disconnected from something essential to their well-being.
But Jung, religion is nothing more than a collective neurosis. It is a fantasy created to ease the unbearable anxiety of existence. People turn to gods and myths because they cannot face the harsh realities of life and death. Psychology should help them mature beyond these illusions, not reinforce them.
Freud, you reduce spirituality to mere wishful thinking, but you ignore its transformative power. Religion is not just about fear. It provides structure, purpose, and a connection to something greater than oneself. Many of my patients have found deep healing not by abandoning spirituality, but by reconnecting with it in a personal way.
But at what cost? Religion demands obedience, suppresses critical thinking, and often promotes guilt and repression. It is precisely this repression that leads to neurosis. You speak of transformation, but I see people shackled by dogma, unable to think for themselves.
Not all spirituality is dogma, Freud. There is a difference between blind faith and personal exploration. I'm not advocating for rigid religious institutions, but for recognizing that spiritual symbols hold psychological value. Dismissing them entirely is to ignore an essential part of the human psyche.
Symbols may have value, but they should be studied scientifically, not revered. A psychologist's job is to help patients see reality as it is, not to offer them myths as consolation.
And yet, Freud, reality is not just what we can measure. The human mind operates on multiple levels, and some truths can only be understood symbolically.
Or perhaps they are merely illusions we have yet to dismantle.
Or wisdom we have yet to embrace.
It seems we are touching on something deeper, whether religion is an illusion to be overcome or an essential aspect of human experience. Dr. Freud, do you see any psychological benefit to spirituality?
If spirituality means self-reflection or a search for personal growth, then I have no objection. But the moment it becomes a belief in divine forces, it steps into the realm of illusion. Patients should be encouraged to face reality, not escape into comforting myths.
But Freud, people do not merely want to face reality, they want to understand it, to find meaning in their struggles. If a myth, a symbol, or a spiritual practice helps them do that, should we not acknowledge its value?
Only if we make it clear that these are human creations, not universal truths. The danger lies in mistaking myth for reality. Science should guide us, not ancient superstitions.
And yet, science alone cannot fulfill the human soul. A person may be free of neurosis but still feel empty. Meaning is just as important as reason.
Meaning must come from within, not from inherited illusions.
But what if those illusions are part of our psychological nature? Perhaps rejecting them entirely is a denial of what makes us human.
A thought-provoking discussion indeed. While you may disagree on the role of religion, one area where you both have made groundbreaking contributions is the study of dreams. This leads us to our next topic, the role of dreams in therapy. Dr. Freud, you developed the concept of dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, where repressed desires and conflicts manifest in symbolic form. Dr. Jung, you expanded this idea, arguing that dreams are not just expressions of personal desires, but also windows into a collective unconscious filled with universal symbols. Let's explore these perspectives. Dr. Freud, would you like to begin?
With pleasure. Dreams are the key to understanding the unconscious. They are not mystical messages or universal symbols. They are disguised expressions of our repressed thoughts, primarily related to desires and unresolved conflicts. In therapy, analyzing dreams allows us to uncover what the patient refuses to acknowledge while awake.
Freud, while I agree that dreams reveal hidden aspects of the psyche, I believe you limit them too much to personal desires and repressed urges. Dreams are much more than that. They contain symbols that are shared across cultures and time, pointing to something greater than individual experience.
Jung, you always seek to elevate dreams into something mystical, but at their core, they are personal, shaped by our individual experiences. When a patient dreams of a locked door, it is not because of some universal meaning, it is because they feel trapped or blocked in life.
And yet, Freud, why do we see the same symbols across different cultures? Dragons, wise old men, shadowy figures. These are not just personal projections, they arise from something deeper, something shared. Dreams are a bridge between our personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, filled with archetypes that guide us.
A fascinating theory, but not one grounded in rigorous analysis. Symbols only have meaning within the context of an individual's experiences. A dream about a dragon does not mean the same thing to a European patient as it does to an Asian one. We must focus on the unique associations of each individual, not impose a grand mythology onto them.
Freud, I am not imposing mythology. I am recognizing patterns that exist beyond any one person. Dreams often provide solutions to psychological struggles, not just reflections of past traumas. If we ignore their symbolic depth, we risk missing the true message they offer.
And if we indulge too much in symbols, we risk drifting into fantasy rather than science. A patient does not need to discover ancient archetypes. They need to face their own reality.
But Freud, reality is not just what we remember from childhood. It is also what we imagine and what we aspire to become. Dreams do not just reflect where we have been, but also where we are going.
Or perhaps they are simply echoes of where we have been, disguised in ways that only psychoanalysis can truly decode.
Or perhaps they are the mind's way of showing us what we have yet to understand.
We now move to a crucial aspect of your theories, human sexuality. Dr. Freud, you argue that sexuality is the fundamental driving force behind human behavior, shaping our desires, fears, and neuroses. Dr. Jung, you propose that sexuality, while important, is just one expression of a broader creative energy that fuels personal growth and transformation. This is a fundamental difference in your perspectives. Dr. Freud, let's start with you.
Thank you. Sexuality is not merely an aspect of human life, it is the foundation of it. From infancy, the libido shapes our development, from the oral and anal stages to the complexities of adult relationships. The sexual life of adult women is a dark continent for psychology, I once said, because sexuality is deeply embedded in our unconscious, influencing every thought and action in ways we often refuse to acknowledge.
Freud, you reduce human nature to nothing more than sexual impulses. While I recognize the power of sexuality, I see it as part of something greater, what I call libido, not just in a sexual sense, but as a broader psychic energy that drives creativity, ambition, and spiritual growth. Human beings do not live merely to satisfy sexual urges. They seek meaning, transformation, and self-realization.
And yet, Jung, whenever you speak of transformation and meaning, you drift further from scientific analysis and deeper into mysticism. Sexuality is not just one force among many. It is the primal force. Every form of human expression, from art to ambition, can be traced back to repressed or sublimated sexual energy.
Freud, must everything lead back to repressed desires? Human beings are more than their instincts. As I once wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But unconscious forces are not only sexual, they include spiritual and symbolic dimensions. Libido is not just about pleasure, it is the fuel that drives personal transformation.
But personal transformation, as you call it, is often nothing more than an elaborate disguise for unresolved desires. A monk who claims to have transcended sexuality has merely repressed it. A poet who writes of love is channeling unfulfilled longing. Civilization itself is built on the repression and redirection of these instincts.
Freud, you underestimate the human capacity for transcendence. Yes, repression exists, but so does sublimation, the process by which raw instincts are transformed into higher pursuits. A great artist does not merely suppress desire, he transforms it into something greater. Libido is not a chain that binds us, it is a force that propels us forward.
Yet history has shown that when repression fails, chaos emerges. Civilization is a delicate balance between instinct and control. If we do not acknowledge the true nature of our desires, they will manifest in destructive ways.
And I would argue that by reducing everything to desire, you blind yourself to the true complexity of the human soul. We are not just creatures seeking gratification, we are beings seeking purpose.
Perhaps. But before seeking purpose, one must first understand what truly drives them.
And perhaps what drives them is not merely what they desire, but what they aspire to become.
We now reach our final question. What is the legacy of your work? How do you see your theories shaping psychology in the future?
A fascinating question. If civilization persists, as I suspect it will do so through the very mechanisms I have described, the balance between instinct and repression. My work has already laid the foundation for psychoanalysis, and I am confident that future generations will continue to refine and apply my theories. After all, where ID was, their ego shall be. The task of psychology is, and always will be, to bring the unconscious into the light.
Freud, as always, you focus on pathology. I believe that the future of psychology must be broader. It must address not only the treatment of neurosis, but also the cultivation of wholeness. My work on archetypes, individuation, and the collective unconscious will help future generations understand the depths of the human psyche. As I once said, your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart. The future of psychology must guide people towards self-realization, not just uncover their repressions.
What if I told you that you don't have to imagine the future? We are speaking to you from the future, and your work has profoundly shaped modern psychology.
The future? Tell us what became of our theories.
Dr. Freud, your ideas became the foundation of psychoanalysis. Your theories on repression and the unconscious influenced therapy, though modern psychology has evolved beyond strict Freudianism. Dr. Jung, your work on archetypes and the collective unconscious has influenced not just psychology, but philosophy, spirituality, and even pop culture. Today, comma psychology integrates multiple approaches, CBT, neuroscience, behavioral studies, but both of your theories remain fundamental.
So, in the end, both paths were necessary.
Perhaps not an end, but a new beginning.
Exactly. Your legacy lives on, and you remain among the greatest minds in psychology. Thank you both for this enriching debate. And to all our viewers, if you enjoyed this journey into the minds of two of history's greatest thinkers, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of Talks from Beyond. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we'll see you in the next episode.